of questions. So if we
Absolutely.
can move on, and
Yeah.
some of them
Yeah,
may be, some of these might be things that you're going to talk
Of
about
course.
anyway. So the first question is from somebody in the Green Party, Martin Francis. How would a Labour government encourage the creation of a greener economy, and in particular the creation of socially useful green jobs? So if you could address yourself to that.
No, certainly. The critical thing is that we have a clarity of objective, and I welcome the fact that the government has accepted the fourth carbon budget that was announced a week ago on Monday. There was some umming and ahhing about it, as you'll know, between the Department of Business and the Department for Energy and Climate Change. But they did accept that, and that is a very good stake in the ground. But what then needs to follow is they need to be looking at the energy generation in this country, because of course that is the major emitter that we have. And if you look at the reforms to the electricity market that have been proposed at the moment, they do not go far enough in that they do not reform the structure of that market to ensure that we get renewables coming through. And that's a critical factor in meeting our long-term energy goal, but also in making sure that we create the jobs in the renewable sector. To do that, you really do have to take on board what the Climate Change Committee has said, and say that your energy generation, your electricity generation, needs to be between 40 and 60 grams of emissions per kilowatt hour. And that, so far, the government have failed to do. So those are the ways, I think, that we need to transform the whole of the structure of the way we think about energy, to make sure that we have clarity for business, clarity for energy generators, and that we change up what at the moment is a very illiquid and sorry if I use a technical word, it's a vertically integrated structure, which simply means this, that the energy generation is done by the same companies as the energy supply. So they have a separate company which they own, which generates most of the energy that they then supply. And they therefore control both the generation and the supply of electricity, which means that the big six companies control the market in a way that doesn't allow new entrants into that market. And that is the key thing that is stopping renewable suppliers and renewable technologies being brought to bear within our energy supply.
The other point which I put to Sarah Tether, so I should really put it to you, was the question of exporting credits. This sort of slight loophole in the bill, in the plans as they've been announced, that it is still possible to get some of the credits from projects that are going on abroad rather than here. What's the Labour Party?
It's not quite that you can get the credits for what's going on abroad. What you can do under the current bill is that you are able to do emissions trading on the carbon, the European trading system under the carbon markets, and that clearly, where that question's coming from is absolutely right, because what it's saying is this: we should be looking not simply at the amount of energy that we consume and use in this country. We should be looking at our overall consumption pattern. And of course, if what we're doing is we're simply allowing companies in India or China or elsewhere in the developing world to build and to create the sort of consumer goods that we then consume in this country, then we have to see that it is still us that is causing those emissions to be created. And that's why the Climate Change Committee has been absolutely right to say that government must focus not simply on the amount of emissions that happen within the UK, but actually it should be focused on the consumption within the UK, and therefore what our carbon footprint is on a global scale, not just confined to the borders of the UK.
Okay, another question from Dominic Odell. We need to establish a fair price for the Green Deal. A low fixed rate loan say 2.5% like in Germany is necessary. Do you agree?
Yes, I do, and I hope, Dominic, if you're here, yeah, there we go. I absolutely agree. That's one of the reasons why in Germany this has been successful, and it's one of the reasons that I mentioned the problem with interest rates under the current proposals. It really is essential that people see that this is something that is going to be of real financial benefit to them. At the moment, they could make these savings at around, well, mortgage rates varying between 4 and 6%, 4 and 7%, depending on who you've got and how long you're locked in for and so on. So people could be doing this already at lower interest rates than they're being offered under the Green Deal. It just makes no sense.
Right, moving on. Two parts to this question. Does the Labour Party support the government's recent commitment to cut carbon emissions by 30%? I think you've covered that
Absolutely.
to some extent by 2020. And does the Labour Party accept...
Well, sorry, on that one,
yeah,
it was more than that. We actually set that goal in place.
Right.
And of course, as part of the European proposals, what we said is we would go further if Europe stepped up to the plate on for the 2030 targets. Yeah.
Absolutely, okay. And the other part of this question, does the Labour Party accept that the adoption of nuclear power is necessary to achieve this target? And that's from two members of the Green Party.
Yes, and I know that's not the answer that you want to hear. Who were they?
Brian Orr and Peter Murray.
Brian and Peter?
Peter's here.
Very good. Yes, the point is simply this. If you look at the problems that are facing our energy industry over the next, well, really, as soon as 2017, within the next 6 years, we're going to see about 25% of our supply begin to go off from the power stations. So we will lose about 25% of our energy generating capacity, our electricity generating capacity between 2017 and about 2024. Now, if you look at how that has to then be replaced, simply saying build lots of wind power, which I support, is part of that mix, but it will not be an adequate solution to the problem. And one of the ways of addressing it is to look at gas. And I expect, in fact, that what the market will do is it will have increased gas supply, increased gas generation over the next 10-year period. And that's partly a good thing because, of course, the emissions from gas-fired power stations are CCGT are much, much lower than for unabated coal. But they're still not low enough. And this is where you have to say, well, if you're going to meet the targets that the government, which I'm pleased about, have just signed up to in the fourth carbon budget, if you're actually going to reduce your emissions by 50% by 2025, then gas will not get you to do that. Gas is about 380, 400 grams. We need to be down at what I said before, 40 to 60 grams per kilowatt hour. Gas doesn't do that. And if you have a substantial element of gas in the generation mix, then we're not going to meet those targets. So there are lots of different constraints here. One is about simply keeping the lights on. One is a more strategic look at how you source your energy and how you ensure against the sort of political shocks that we've seen with gas supply from Russia and so on coming through into Eastern Europe being cut off, and make sure that you have that continuity of supply. And there we need more interconnectors with the continent. If we're to do that, we need to be building those as part of that security. But critically here, you do need to meet our renewables obligations, and you do need to get down to meet the 2025 targets. And it's very difficult, I think, to see how you're going to get the investment in new generation capacity that we need, get the security of supply that we need, and meet those targets if nuclear is not part of that mix. But one of the very important things about this is that we said there should be no subsidy, hidden or otherwise, to new nuclear. Now, the government has just gone back on that, if you look at the proposals that they put forward as part of the electricity market reform, what they've done is they've put in feed-in tariffs for supply into the market, which would favour nuclear. And they've also put in a floor price for carbon, which in many respects one would welcome, but only as part of an integrated package. They've put in a floor price for carbon, which is going to be a hidden subsidy here, particularly the feed-in tariffs, to nuclear. Now that goes against what they said, and indeed it goes against what they're still saying, but it's very clear that that was why they chose this particular contract for difference feed-in tariff, as opposed to a premium feed-in tariff. A premium feed-in tariff would have given a high level in a long-term contract, a high level price in a long-term contract for renewables such as wind. A contract for difference does not. What it does is it looks at the difference between what is basically the oil price and so it looks at the structure of the market in that sense, and it says we'll pay you the differential of your production against that. And that's why, of course, it favours nuclear and not offshore or onshore wind. So they really have tried to fiddle the books. They've fiddled the structure here of the incentives that they're providing under the electricity market reforms. And that really does need to be made clear, and they need to own up to that. And I would still say that we should be getting the structure of the market right, but I wouldn't go, I think, with the tenor of the question, which is, can we do away with nuclear altogether? The answer to that is no, I don't think we can, because we need security of supply, we need to ensure that we do keep the lights on, and it's part of the necessary energy mix if we're going to actually meet our targets.
Have you investigated other forms of nuclear, like thorium rather than uranium?
Have I personally investigated?
No, has anybody? Is that a possibility? I know thorium is much more plentiful, but you can't make weapons from it at the end, so it was never developed. Well, you don't know about thorium.
I'm sorry, I can't enlighten you on that.
Okay.
I'm against anything that would give us good energy with low emissions that would be impossible to make weapons from. I think that's a jolly good thing.
Oh, well, have a look at thorium,
okay,
because that might be interesting to you. Yeah. Yeah, but I've got a load of more questions. Brian. Sorry, we have got a roving mic if it's available. Or you can come up and use the.
I want to introduce a bit of politics here. Very technical and quite kind with the Tories. I was interested, Barry, if I know you the first name, that twice you referred to keeping the lights on.